Next week, the House will begin public impeachment hearings. At the center of the proceedings is California Democrat Adam Schiff, chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Cheryl profiled him this week in the Times, writing, quote, adored by the left, reviled by the right, Schiff has become a Rorschach test for American politics. Depending on one's point of view, he's either going to save the republic or destroy it. She added, quote, there is little room for error for Mr. Schiff.
That's absolutely right. You know, Adam Schiff is, in effect, the anti-Trump. That is how he is casting himself. He is calm, he's measured, he's unflappable, he's a former federal prosecutor, and he knows that he has to approach these hearings in a very solemn way. He wants to keep things calm and even keel. He wants the Democrats to look like they are engaging in a very serious endeavor.
Who's his key witness?
Well, his key witness will be Bill Taylor, the top diplomat in Ukraine, who is also, in a way, kind of the public servant mirror image of Adam Schiff. Taylor is a military veteran, a Vietnam veteran. He's a respected career diplomat. He has served in every administration, Republican and Democratic, since 1985. And he is the one who has laid out in the clearest terms this quid pro quo charge that the president was withholding military aid from Ukraine and also withholding a meeting a White House meeting with the Ukrainian president in exchange for the Ukrainian president's announcement that he was going to investigate the Bidens.
What about beyond Taylor? We also had Gordon Sondland, the ambassador to the EU, retract some of his previous testimony from last month and now lean into this attempted quid pro quo. Inside the White House, how are they prepared to counter what happens next week in this public phase if you have Ambassador Taylor and also this new testimony from Sondland?
That is a great question, and they have had at the White House 6 or 8 different strategies right now. 6 or 8 different
What's the strategy
messages.
right now?
It's all over the place. It's President Trump thinking and just kind of saying what he sees, right? When he's watching TV, when he's reading something. That's why you've seen it's no quid pro quo. It's Russia 2.0. The message changes every day, and that's what's one of the things that's so frustrating to Republicans who support this president, allies that want him to survive this and survive the campaign. They want him to have one message, which, as you know, with this president is a very tough thing for him to do, but they want him to have a message, and they want him to, the White House, to tell others, surrogates, what that message is, and they have not done that.
I think the central message is also to discredit the process and to lean into the call. Look at the shirts on Trump supporters at rallies. Read the transcript. They are not backing away from what he did. They're saying, yes, he did make that phone call.
Well, he's not backing away from it.
He's not. But the reality is, when the president watches those hearings on Wednesday, on Thursday, how he reacts, we don't know the answer to that. So, I mean, this has consumed this White House without question. They're acting like, there's nothing to see here. But of course there is, and it's getting under his skin.
What's interesting, though, is the president, even in private, does not believe that call was wrong. I mean, he's argued repeatedly to other Republican senators.
Right.
You can't say I did anything wrong. That call was great. He wanted that transcript perfect, as he would say. He wanted that transcript put out because he thought the American people would read it and it would somewhat inoculate him. So did Bill Barr, his Justice Department.
It's one of the oddest things about this is that everybody agrees on the facts.
Yeah.
That's the oddest thing about this. So it's just they disagree on whether it was right or wrong.
If the Republicans are not really engaging on the substance of the facts here, let's go inside what their actual strategy is. I was at the Senate this week talking to lawmakers, and forceful defenses of the president's conduct, as we've been talking about, were few and far between. The emerging argument, as Anita was saying, seems to be that the president's intent and actions were erratic and inappropriate, but not impeachable offenses.
What I can tell you about the Trump policy toward the Ukraine, it was incoherent. They seem to be incapable of forming a quid pro quo.
But will this party's fragile coalition hold together? As Anita's colleague Tim Alberta, our friend, writes in this week's Politico magazine, quote, who will betray Trump? Donald Trump knows there are potential traitors in his midst. His presidency could depend on keeping them at bay.
Well, that's exactly right. I actually spent much of this week in Texas in the district of Will Hurd. He's a Republican who is a rare critic of President Trump. And he and these other Republican critics of Trump, people like Fred Upton in Michigan and Adam Kinzinger in Illinois, all have voted with the House Republicans in rejecting the plan for these impeachment hearings to go forward. So The question is, will they hang with the president? If they stick with the president going forward, then Republicans can just write this whole exercise off as a partisan, impeachment, a Soviet-style impeachment inquiry, as they like to call it. But if those Republican critics of the president break, then we could see one of two things. Americans could actually view this as more of a legitimate process, a legitimate congressional exercise of oversight over the presidency, and other Republicans could follow suit.
Jim Jordan, the member of the House Judiciary Committee and Oversight, he's now being shifted over by Kevin McCarthy, the GOP leader, to the Intelligence Committee. Why is that significant?
Well, Jim Jordan, in the president's eyes, is one of his most vociferous warriors. He thinks that Jim Jordan is great on TV. He thinks Jim Jordan is willing to defend basically whatever accusations he's being charged with. And the president wanted Jim Jordan over on the Intelligence Committee. He and Mark Meadows, also part of the Freedom Caucus, are, in the president's mind, his most effective defenders and his most pugilistic defenders who are willing to go out and really take on his critics. And the president has one more defender on the Intelligence Committee to ask questions, to interrogate witnesses, to really do the president's bidding.
What about John Bolton, the former national security advisor? His lawyers say he has a lot to share, but he's waiting to see if the courts decide that he can break from executive privilege and actually appear on Capitol Hill. Do Democrats need Bolton to make the most compelling case possible?
I think a lot of people want to hear from John Bolton, but I think the Democrats feel like they have a solid case, a good case. That's why they're moving forward with the public testimony. And as Cheryl mentioned, they're going to say every person who doesn't come, it's just obstruction. That could be an article of impeachment. They don't need those other people, and they're not going to wait for them.
I think the Bolton story would, though, help Democrats with one thing they still have not done, is sold this story to the American people, explained the issue here. I thought it was fascinating today that John Bolton's lawyer said he has relevant information that lawmakers do not know. He didn't have to say that. He could have said, Mr. Bolton is going to wait until we hear from the lawyers. So John
Why
Bolton
is he saying that? What's your reporting tell you?
I think that Mr. Bolton, as we know, is a great communicator. He's one of the most effective conservative communicators in this town. He wanted to, I think, add his information to the top of all this as we go into those public hearings next week, that there is more out there. So I think it's giving an entree, as Cheryl was talking about some of those Republicans. I remain pretty skeptical of a big Republican break here because it has not happened until this point.
And
I would
most
be
Republican
stunned if
strategists
anything
do
like that
also.
happened.
That's not going to happen. The one thing, though, that the president has been saying, of course, this president, even one person turning is going to set him off. One Republican going against him. The thing that he wants right now, that he's been so upset about this week and these last couple of weeks, is he wants more Republicans out there speaking about him, defending him, supporting him, and he hasn't had that. And I think that's where Jim Jordan is.
It'd be hard to predict where Republicans go. We haven't seen Bolton testify. We haven't seen Ambassador Taylor put his hand in the air.
And the president doesn't have the warmest relationships with Senate Republicans. There are a lot of them who are constrained by the idea that the president's popular in their states. The president means incredibly popular with the Republican Party. But he doesn't have those institutional ties with Senate Republicans. And Bob, you go to the Hill far more than I do. You talk to these people, in private. They are very skeptical of his president, his tactics, his measures. There's not a lot of love lost there with some of these folks. Now, would they be willing to publicly break? That's a totally different question.
Cheryl?
Well, they're going to need a lot of Republicans to break in order to convict the president in the Senate if he does indeed get impeached in the House, which looks likely. They'd need about 20. And let's also talk about some of these Democrats. Do you think Doug Jones, a Democrat who's up for re-election in Alabama, is going to break with the president? Exactly. Or, Joe Manchin, do you think, he just won re-election, so maybe he's okay?
And their allies, are they willing to break at all?
Most, they don't want to talk about it right now, especially like the moderate Republicans, like the Susan Collinses of the world and Cory Gardner's, both in tough races. They don't want to talk about it. They'll say, well, I might be a juror in this case, so I better not address this.
Every time I go up to Senator Alexander of Tennessee, he just goes, I'm a juror. I have nothing to say.
But he's free. But he's free because he's retiring.
He's free, as you said, just like Will Hurd, who you mentioned, retiring in Texas.